The first man reached for the CEO's arm just as she realized every exit had been blocked. She had less than 10 seconds to understand what was happening, and the one person she had spent months treating like he was invisible was the only man standing between her and the people who had come to take her away. If you believe in kindness, forgiveness, hope, and second chances, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel, because sometimes the person we overlook is the very person who saves us when everyone else disappears. The morning had begun like any other for Vivian Carlisle, the 42-year-old CEO of Carlisle Biotech, a woman whose name appeared regularly in business magazines and whose signature could move millions of dollars with a single stroke of a pen. She had built her company from a small laboratory into a respected medical research firm, but success had hardened parts of her that she no longer noticed. Vivian trusted numbers more than people, efficiency more than compassion, and appearances more than character. She wore immaculate suits, arrived in a polished black sedan, and expected every person around her to perform their role without inconvenience. The driver assigned to her 6 months earlier, Everett Shaw, had quickly become one of the people she barely saw. He opened doors, carried files, waited patiently, and drove her through traffic without ever demanding attention. To Vivian, he was simply the quiet man behind the wheel. Everett was 47, broad-shouldered, disciplined, and unusually calm. He had once served as a Navy SEAL, though Vivian knew nothing about it. After leaving the military, Everett had struggled to adjust to ordinary life. He had lost friends overseas, carried memories he rarely discussed, and spent years trying to understand who he was when there was no mission telling him what mattered. He eventually found peace in raising his young daughter, Nora, after becoming a single father. When Nora developed a serious heart condition, Everett left the security field because he wanted to be present for every appointment, every difficult morning, and every moment when his little girl needed him. Driving became a practical job that allowed him to pay medical bills while keeping his schedule flexible. He never told Vivian any of this. He had learned that people often respected a uniform more than the person wearing it. Vivian, meanwhile, had developed an unfortunate habit of judging Everett by the job he performed. If his shoes were not perfectly polished, she noticed. If he was 10 seconds late because of traffic, she noticed. If he suggested taking a safer route, she sometimes dismissed him without looking up from her phone. Once, when an important investor was approaching her vehicle, Vivian quietly asked Everett to wait farther away because she did not want the man seeing her driver standing beside her. Everett simply nodded and moved back. What she never saw was the hurt behind his expression. He did not resent her. He had spent too many years learning that anger could cloud judgment. Instead, he reminded himself that people sometimes revealed their wounds by the way they treated others. That morning, Everett was taking Vivian to a private medical technology conference at a large downtown convention center. The city was bright beneath a pale blue sky, with office workers filling sidewalks and delivery trucks moving through crowded streets. Vivian spent most of the drive reviewing a contract involving a controversial acquisition. She was so focused on the documents that she barely noticed Everett repeatedly checking the mirrors. He had seen the same gray SUV 3 times in 10 minutes. Then he noticed a second vehicle behind it. The cars were not simply traveling in the same direction. They were matching their movements. Everett's instincts sharpened instantly. Years of training had taught him that danger often announced itself through small inconsistencies rather than dramatic events. He changed lanes. The gray SUV changed lanes. He slowed near an intersection. The SUV slowed. He accelerated through a green light. The SUV followed. Vivian finally looked up, irritated by the sudden change in driving. She asked what was happening, but Everett kept his eyes on the road and told her they were taking a different route. He did not frighten her. He did not yet know how many people were involved or what they wanted. He only knew that something was wrong. 3 minutes later, he pulled toward the convention center's secured entrance. Before Vivian could step out, a delivery van abruptly stopped across the driveway. 2 men emerged from it, followed by another pair from the gray SUV. They moved with purpose, not confusion. One approached Vivian's door while another blocked Everett's side. For one terrible second, Vivian froze. The man outside her door grabbed the handle, but Everett had already locked it. Another man moved toward the driver's side. Everett looked at Vivian and told her to stay down. The calmness in his voice was more frightening than shouting could ever have been. Vivian finally understood. They were not protesters. They were not angry employees. They were not thieves looking for a car. They had come for her. The man outside smashed the side window with a heavy object, sending glass across the seat. Vivian screamed and instinctively covered her head. Everett reacted instantly. He pushed Vivian away from the broken window, released his seatbelt, and moved with a speed she could never have imagined from the quiet driver she had barely acknowledged for months. The first attacker reached inside. Everett caught his wrist, pulled him off balance, and forced him away from the vehicle without unnecessary brutality. A second attacker rushed forward, but Everett used the car door as a barrier and redirected him into the side of the van. Everything happened in seconds. Everett was not fighting like an angry man. He was moving like someone trained to survive. The attackers expected a driver. They had found a former SEAL. Vivian watched from the floor as Everett created space between her and the men. His movements were controlled, deliberate, and frighteningly efficient. He kept checking her position while defending himself, making sure none of them could reach her. One attacker tried to circle around the vehicle, but Everett spotted him in the reflection of a nearby window and moved before the man could get close. Then Everett saw something that changed everything. One of the attackers had a distinctive scar across his left hand. Everett recognized him. Not personally, but from a photograph he had seen months earlier while working a private security assignment. The man had been connected to a corporate extortion network suspected of targeting wealthy executives. Everett had never imagined that network would come after Vivian. He realized this was not a random kidnapping. Someone had planned every detail. Everett got Vivian into a secure section of the building while security personnel rushed toward them. The attackers fled when police sirens approached from nearby streets. Within minutes, the convention center was surrounded by officers, but Everett remained beside Vivian, watching every entrance. Vivian was trembling. The woman who had negotiated million-dollar contracts without blinking now struggled to breathe normally. She looked at Everett differently. For the first time, she was not looking at the driver. She was looking at the man who had protected her. But the biggest shock came when investigators discovered that the attackers had information that could only have come from inside Carlisle Biotech. They knew Vivian's schedule, her vehicle, her conference attendance, and even the exact route she normally traveled. Someone inside the company had betrayed her. As investigators questioned staff, Vivian began to remember the small moments she had ignored. Everett had warned her about unusual vehicles. He had suggested changing routes. He had noticed unfamiliar security personnel near the building. She had dismissed every concern because she believed she understood the world better than the people around her. Now she realized that Everett had been paying attention when she had not. The investigation eventually uncovered a devastating truth. A senior executive named Graham Bell had secretly arranged the kidnapping. He had been manipulating company finances and feared Vivian was about to discover the theft. His plan was to force her to sign documents transferring control of several valuable assets before making her disappear. The kidnappers had been promised a large payment. Vivian felt betrayed not only by Graham but by herself. She had spent years surrounding herself with people she considered important while overlooking the person who had quietly protected her every day. That afternoon, after the police had secured the building, Vivian found Everett sitting alone near a window, looking down at the busy street. His hands were scraped and bruised from the confrontation. She approached slowly. For perhaps the first time since hiring him, Vivian did not give him an instruction. She thanked him. Everett accepted the words quietly, but Vivian could see that gratitude alone could not erase months of disrespect. She admitted that she had judged him by his position, treated him as invisible, and failed to recognize his humanity. She told him that she was ashamed. Everett did not immediately respond. Then he told her something that changed the way she understood him. He explained that after leaving the military, he had spent years believing his most valuable days were behind him. He had watched friends receive medals while he returned home carrying memories no one could see. He had become a driver because he needed to provide for Nora, not because he had stopped being capable. He had learned that dignity was not determined by a job title. Vivian listened without interrupting. Then Everett showed her a photograph of Nora. It was a simple picture of a smiling little girl holding a red balloon. Vivian smiled through tears. She asked about her. Everett told her that Nora was waiting for another medical procedure and that he had been working extra hours to cover the expenses. Vivian remembered all the times she had complained about his schedule, never knowing what he was sacrificing to keep his daughter safe. Something inside her changed. She offered to help, but Everett initially refused. He did not want charity. Vivian understood. Instead of simply writing a check, she asked him what he needed. That question mattered. Everett finally told her that Nora needed access to a specialized pediatric cardiac program, but the cost was beyond what he could manage. Vivian made a decision. Carlisle Biotech had been researching a new medical device that could help children with certain heart conditions. She arranged for Nora to receive an evaluation through the company's medical foundation, making sure Everett knew it was not a favor that made him indebted to her. It was simply one person helping another person who had once saved her life. Weeks passed. Graham was arrested, the company's internal security was rebuilt, and Vivian began changing the culture around her. She stopped asking employees about their titles and started asking about their families. She learned people's names. She listened to maintenance workers, assistants, security guards, receptionists, and drivers. She discovered that many of the people she had once considered background figures were carrying enormous responsibilities outside the office. And Everett? He remained her driver for a while, but their relationship became something entirely different. He was no longer invisible. Eventually, Vivian offered him a position overseeing executive security and emergency preparedness. Everett accepted only after making sure the role would allow him to remain present for Nora. His first recommendation was simple: every employee, regardless of rank, should be treated with dignity. Vivian agreed. Months later, Nora successfully completed her procedure. On the day she returned home, Vivian visited with a small gift. She expected to find Everett emotional, but instead she found him smiling beside his daughter as sunlight filled the room. Nora thanked Vivian for helping her father. Vivian shook her head and told her that her father had been the one who saved her. Nora smiled and replied that perhaps they had saved each other. Vivian carried those words with her. She had once believed power came from wealth, reputation, and authority. Now she understood something far more valuable. A person's worth could not be measured by their uniform, their salary, their car, or the title printed on a business card. Sometimes the quietest person in the room carried the greatest courage. Sometimes the person we overlook has already survived battles we know nothing about. And sometimes, second chances begin when we finally have the humility to see another human being clearly. Before the story ends, I want you to leave a meaningful comment. Have you ever judged someone by their job, appearance, or position, only to discover that they were far more valuable than you realized? Share what this story taught you about kindness, dignity, forgiveness, or second chances. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a meaningful comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another emotional journey. Your support helps our community continue sharing stories that remind us that kindness can return when we least expect it. Vivian never forgot the day the kidnappers came for her. But she remembered something even more deeply. The man she once looked down on had never looked down on her. He had simply seen a human being who needed protection. And that was the greatest lesson of all. Sometimes the people we fail to notice are the ones quietly carrying the strength, courage, and kindness that the rest of us desperately need.